Hello everyone, my name is Pixlriffs and welcome back to the Minecraft Survival Guide. This is episode 200 and as promised, I'm going to give you folks a full world tour. We're going to do this using the replay mod and some fancy shaders, so sit back and enjoy the tour. This farmhouse was one of the earliest things I built in the series and has remained so. I recently took a poll about whether we should change it and I've decided I'm going to keep it as is. A reminder of the early days of the series, and it's kind of been my base of operations for all of the episodes that we've done recently. Most episodes you'll find me starting either at my storage room or at this farmhouse, because it just feels like the center of my world right now. It's got a bit of storage, it's got some villagers who trade some very good books, it's got an enchanting setup and a safe bed, and basically everything I usually need to get myself oriented in the world before I move out and do other things. Once the farmhouse really felt settled in, of course my first big project was to build a massive wheat field around it, and I am still patching up this wheat field from occasional bits where I have to clear out sections of the land or mobs jump up and down on it and trample the crops, so occasionally you'll find patches of that need fixing up. I don't tend to harvest the wheat all that much, but it just looks so pretty on the hillside here. Of course, when I do harvest the wheat, it typically goes towards feeding some of the animals that we have in the barn and stable over here. We've got a bunch of horses, including a skeleton horse and a saddled pig in there as well. And of course, in the barn, we have a herd of cows and a flock of sheep. Looking a little bit thin on the ground lately, but that's mainly to promote passive mob spawning elsewhere in the world. Speaking of passive mobs, of course, around the back of the house we have a chicken coop. The design of this has been broken since Minecraft 1.14, but I'll patch it up one of these days. One thing I won't be patching up though is this nether portal, which was the first nether portal we ever used to enter the nether in this world, but in the lore I've developed for the world, only the people in the castle have access to the nether, so that portal had to go. 1.14 didn't break all the farms though, it actually introduced the opportunity to automatically shear sheep using dispensers, so I put that to good use in a multicolored wool farm here. Across the bridge, I have what I think of as the industrial area. It's where I tend to test out redstone farms and the like. And this one over here is the sugarcane farm. It was one of the first things I built and one of the first things I really fully decorated as a farm design as well. The farm itself is kind of basic compared to other sugarcane farms that are out there, but it does the job. Of course, one of the other major buildings out here in the industrial area is my storage building, and this contains basically all of the supplies that I will need. It's getting a little bit small though. I'm starting to run out of space for some things despite the shulker boxes, so I might end up moving out of this at some point. Anyway, a lot of the storage is labeled and manual. Some of the stuff downstairs is automatically sorted, and there is room for expansion, but something tells me we will need to graduate from this and move on to something bigger in the fullness of time. Outside here in the industrial area, we've got a few farms. This one here is for cactus, and the ones next door are for pumpkins and melons. We established these quite early in the series, and they've been reliably churning out resources, some of which now even go into composters, so they can be turned into bone meal, thanks to 1.14 adding those. The rest of this area is mostly not very decorated. It's just a large open space that I use to test out farms and do occasional experiments on creepers and things like that. Right here we've got a cobblestone generator that can run automatically based on a piston feed tape, and nearby we even have stuff like an automatic tree farm, which to be honest I haven't used for a while because it really wasn't all that good. I will probably end up redesigning this and coming up with another farm, or perhaps searching for a farm that better suits my needs. We've got a cocoa bean farm over here as well. Some of these never really found a permanent home because they weren't really all that necessary, or in the case of this music disc farm, it's better to have them out here in the open where creepers can spawn wherever they want to. The skeleton in here has been an employee for a while. Speaking of employees, we have a village breeder here that no longer works as of Minecraft 1.14 because the breeding mechanics changed, but before that we were able to take some villagers from that breeder and populate my trading hall, which you can see in the background and in some of these shots here. A few of these villagers have unfortunately died to pillager attacks recently. It's kind of my fault for going with such an open design for this place, but I am planning to basically start a trading hall from scratch at some point soon to take advantage of some of the revamped villager mechanics in newer versions. For now though, having a crop nano farm nearby means that I can build up a supply of carrots and potatoes nice and quickly to trade those with the farmers that will trade for them, and that's a pretty handy way of getting emeralds along with all of the other benefits that these villagers provide. My favorite farmer is this guy up here on the right hand side. He's a legacy farmer, which means he'll basically trade most of his supplies infinitely. Of course, one of the newest additions to this area is my iron farm, the Iron Tower, and unfortunately we've had a couple of problems with this farm. I know how to fix them, so that'll be coming in a future episode, but for now, it seems to generate more iron on the outside of the tower than it does on the inside of the tower, which is a bit unfortunate, but nothing we can't fix soon. Before we head out to the town of Founder's Forge, I should probably take a quick pit stop in the cave down here, which was one of the first places I went mining and one of the first places I discovered a spawner. We have a spider spawner down here that I turned into one of our early string farms, although the amount of chests I put there was a little bit optimistic, but this farm still functions just fine. It's got a minecart underneath some magma blocks picking up the spider's drops. There's no XP element to it, it's just for string and spider eyes really. And it still churns out a decent amount of spiders if I want to AFK here. Not a patch on the double cave spider spawner I have elsewhere though. Up on the hill here we have a windmill. This is my one chunk windmill design, which you can find in a tutorial build elsewhere. It's been rebuilt by a bunch of other people actually. A lot of people seem to really love this design, so thank you if you've built this in your world. It's still kind of cozy in there, even though I haven't really done all that much with the interior, and I think it provides a perfect little pastoral outlook over the rest of the farming area before you move on to the slightly busier areas like the town. In the neighbouring forest, I built this giant tree stump that was supposed to have been struck by lightning a long time ago, and that has a charcoal generator inside of it. You can feed logs into it and it will perpetually refuel itself in order to cook more charcoal for you. Not only that, but we added a bunch of campfires to the top to make it look like a stove was merrily burning away in there, and it really makes it stand out even though the whole thing is kind of hidden inside the forest there. Up in the sky, we have a hot air balloon that's concealing a dark room mob spawner, a single floor flushing out with dispensers, nothing too advanced, but just perfect for what we needed at that stage in the series, and I was really happy with how the hot air balloon came together. To this day, it remains one of my favourite things I've ever built in this whole world. Speaking of things I've built though, we now come at last to the town of Founder's Forge. This was established a long time ago in the series and of course is still a work in progress. There's a lot to do here, there's a lot of buildings to make, but I'm really happy with what we've managed to do so far. Like the Blacksmiths Guild here, where people would make tools and equipment to mine out the ravine in the center of town that's supposed to basically be providing both the energy and the industry of the entire area. And I really like the way the Blacksmiths Guild came together. There's some really nice interior stuff in here, even if only the bottom half of the building is done. We've also got a marketplace in the town. There's lots of shops and stalls, and there's a bakery and a butcher's, lots of places that you would expect to find in a thriving town that's got lots of people, lots of industry, and plenty of money to spend as well as money to make. We have a couple of secret areas elsewhere in the town though. Underneath the main row of shops we've got a netherwort farm that I was using to make the red nether brick that eventually went into the roof of the castle. The central ravine is decorated with cyan-stained clay and black concrete powder to give it that kind of ashy, volcanic look, including some of the magma veins that we've got running up the walls there as well. But this town isn't all grimy and dirty. There's some high-class shops up here selling expensive clothes, nice books. There's a pet shop on the corner there that sells mostly fish, and coincidentally neighbouring it is a cat cafe. It's not the only animal-themed thing in the town though. I recently made this fox head tavern, which has a cartoony fox head above it, but there are actually some resident foxes on the inside taking care of the place while the owner is away. This building up here in the mountains houses the blast furnace and is one of the many blacksmiths that I decided to build in the area. Unfortunately, this build never really got finished, and while the functionality is there, the exterior kind of isn't. One of the other things I really want to return to soon is Old Town, a kind of Chinese and Japanese inspired area out here on the fringes of town, and it's supposed to be where Founder's Forge started out before people had to abandon this area thanks to the swamp rising and some of the houses starting to fall into it. So it's meant to have a bit of a ruined and run-down vibe, but the thing that dominates the center of Old Town is this Chinese junk boat, which is primarily here to disguise the fact that we have a kelp farm here and an automatic smoker which smelts the kelp, turning it into kelp that we can use for kelp blocks, which could then in turn go and fuel the smoker again. One of the islands in the center of town houses a bit of a secret. Kind of like the Batcave, I suppose. We have a secret potions lab down here that you can swim into through that entrance on the right-hand side there. And this is where I do a lot of potion brewing. Going to be brewing up a lot of potions here very soon for How Did We Get Here, and I might have to borrow that conduit as well. That's not the only alchemy that goes on in town, though. We have a concrete maker here that I'm eventually going to develop into an alchemist's guild. For now, it's just got a machine there and a bunch of storage. Moving on into the rest of the town, there are a lot of foundations here that need to be built out into houses like this one on the left, or useful buildings like Vulcan's Blacksmith, which is the site of my first and probably my main automatic smelter in this world. I still come back to this auto smelter time and time again whenever I want large batches of anything. Mostly glass these days, to be honest. It's mostly glass. And the highlight of Founders Forge really has to be Brimstone Castle, which was named by some fine folks in my audience and voted upon by you, and I really, really like this place. It's probably the first castle I've ever built on this scale, and it's got so many lovely different details and towers. I could walk around this thing for days. I could also decorate it for days, and there are still some sections of it which remain unfinished, but I'm really happy with the stuff we've got done, like the soldiers' mess hall over here. There are other features like the library, which are really, really colourful and have loads of character, loads of chances to use colour and paintings and all of the kind of stuff that I don't get to tinker with all that much when I'm working on technical builds. One of my other favourite features of the castle is the botanist's tower, where a botanist would come and study all of the plant life and greenery in the local area. He's even got some coral and sea pickles in here. The castle also has a brewery, and the design of that is something I'm very proud of, with the magma and soul sand providing all of that bubbly fermentation in the giant vat there, some wine barrels and beer barrels strewn around the place, and, thanks to a recent edition of 1.14, an area to crawl into as though there are rat tunnels nearby. The rats probably also spend a fair amount of time at the loading dock around the back of the castle, where there are lots of barrels and crates to be loaded onto barges that go down the nearby river. The castle is supposed to be a commercial place after all, and instead of a throne room, it's got a grand inspection hall for people to have their goods inspected as they make their way into the area. Below that is the central nether portal of my world, and that is where we enter the nether hub for the first time. The Nether Hub is where I decided to leave the story aspects of the world behind and just focus on designing something that looked kind of cool. In particular, the main floor of the Nether Hub is a giant compass with biome dioramas built around it. These are still a work in progress, but we have a bunch of them built so far. I think there are about 6 or 7 of them built out, representing different overworld biomes. We've got swamps, deserts, forests of various kinds, and a plains biome with some stuff growing. Eventually, even mesas, oceans, mushroom islands, the nether, and the end are all going to find their place in the dioramas here. For now, though, I think it looks pretty cool, and we're going to have even more expansion to the Nether Hub in future. Above the Nether Hub, though, is one of my latest projects, a giant gold farm built on the nether ceiling, which we broke the bedrock for in a pretty early episode of the series. While I did build some gold farms before this multi-platform gold farm is the most recent addition, and while it is loosely based on Snow Crash and Ilmango's designs, it's probably not built in the most efficient way possible, because, let's face it, I was the one building it, and that's not always my priority, but it certainly looks pretty cool, especially with these shaders on. Now, moving out through the nether, we will come to a variety of other things, including a wither skeleton farm, which I haven't really touched for a while, and it hasn't really been producing all that much stuff. As of Minecraft 1.14, I have a feeling I'll need to do a better job of spawn-proofing the surrounding area of the nether fortress, or just come back through and redesign this whole thing entirely. There's definitely some more efficient farm designs out there that we can make use of. Moving on, though, the Nether Hub connects us out to a wide variety of other things in the world, and by flying out a little bit further, we get to some more exotic destinations, like the Suspicious Stew Factory, which I've built here on this mushroom island, starting to convert some of the surrounding terrain into grass. Not sure if I'm going to continue that in future, but for now, I think this is a pretty nice looking factory. It's got a bunch of brown mushrooms in it, which can be milked if they're fed certain flowers to provide suspicious stew, and we're going to be needing one of those in the near future for the How Did We Get Here advancement. I still haven't finished the back wall, though, and there are a lot of builds in this world that remain unfinished in that way. Moving on to the outside, we have the creeper farm out here in the water outside the Suspicious Stew Factory, and for some reason the creepers aren't running off the platforms today. I kind of feel like they might not recognize buttons as a block they can walk on anymore, but one of my favorite things about this whole farm design, I dedicated an entire episode to this, is the item transport pipes under the ocean that take them out to the storage system where we store any gunpowder the farm happens to produce. Moving out over the ocean from here, we end up at a couple of things. First of all, the Turtle Paradise Island that I made in the episode where we were talking all about turtles and turtle breeding and turtle hatching. This is actually one of my favorite little hidden features of the world. I don't come out here all that much, but it's always kind of nice to stop by and see the turtles when I do. Of course, the main reason I come over to this area is the Guardian farm, which was my main experience farm for quite a long time, and of course, a source of some of my favourite blocks in the Prismarine family. This thing is a bunch of soul sand bubble columns pushing Guardians up to the surface in the same design as Cubfam 135 kind of pioneered, and this thing still produces a pretty large amount of experience and a whole lot of drops, some of which I don't even have the storage space for anymore. The Guardians just keep coming, regardless of what time of day or night it is, and it's a pretty special farm to have. In fact, until I built the Enderman farm in a recent episode, I used to come here to mend my tools with experience all the time, and sometimes I still do. The next place might not feel so connected to the Guardian farm because this is the first village I ever encountered, and of course because it was generated in Minecraft 1.13, it still has all the original village houses, even though the villages themselves are looking a bit more 1.14 now. Now the reason I came out here after the Guardian farm was because it has my squid farm, which if we'll take a quick zoom out, you can see I've dried out the riverbed in a 128 block radius around the farm, making this the only place in the surrounding countryside that will spawn squid. And it definitely spawns them quite frequently. I get probably 9,000 ink per hour out of this on a good day. Recently though, I added to my collection of water-based farms with this, turning an entire footprint of a river biome into a giant tank in the sky, purely so I could use it to farm the drowned. This is one of the only effective ways of farming drowned in Java Edition, and this thing has already provided me with a bunch of Nautilus shells, a bunch of tridents, and a pretty reasonable quantity of gold, as well as all the dead salmon I could ever ask for. So I'm pretty happy I built this thing. It looks like an enormous jigsaw puzzle in the sky, but to be honest, it's one of my favourite farms I've built lately, purely because it just works. It works super well, it provides a bunch of drowned, and I do need to finish building the roof on it, but then during the day or night I'll be able to get a trident anytime I feel like it. It is one of the reasons I used shaders for this tour though, because without them the farm does look like a giant mess in the middle of the sky. From one village to another though, because out here, a long distance away, we have an intersection of a jungle and swamp biome that I decided to make into my first 1.14 village project, building this entire village up from scratch, the perimeter, the houses, getting zombie villagers from each area and curing them so that we could breed them together, and generally turning this into a villager experimentation playground. This is where I got to grips with all of the new professions, figured out what made the villagers tick. We ended up spawning a whole bunch of iron golems here, none of which I can really find it in my heart to dispose of at this point, so I've kind of abandoned this project for now. I still like the style of the houses, and we could probably come back and do more with this in future, or even start a whole new village project somewhere else. I'll definitely be finding the swamp and jungle villagers again though, because I really like the outfits they all have. And I'm kind of fond of this place. We spent a week here or so in the first stages of 1.14, and it's still got a lot of happy memories nearby, hopefully for the villagers as well as for me. This isn't the only village I've challenged myself with since 1.14 came out though, because out here in the desert, I've actually developed a bit of a desert fort out here. It's mostly because of the wall around the outside, which was designed to keep out pillager raids after this was the site of my first disastrous attempt at a raid, but I've managed to breed the local population back up and even designed them some new houses, which is probably my way of saying sorry for messing with your village in the first place. The reason this village is so perfect for raid practice, though, is that in the nearby vicinity, there is a pillager tower, a pillager outpost out here in the desert, which spawns a fair amount of the guys, and I'll probably come back here at some point in the near future, not least because I will need to try out a couple more raids, but also because I just like messing with the pillagers every now and again. Believe me, a raid farm is something I plan to do in the near future, so keep an eye out for that in the early stages of 200 plus here in the Minecraft Survival Guide. It's not the only thing I've built out here in the desert though, because further afield we have the site of my first ever proper fossil find in the Minecraft Survival Guide world, and I was really happy we managed to find one of these because I always found them by accident. It's really difficult to find a fossil on purpose, and I happened to find one down here in a ravine that had lava at the bottom of it, so it felt like the perfect place to start a paleontological dig site and go digging for bones and coal, both of which I have found by the bucket load down here in this ravine. I still think fossils look super atmospheric though. It's super cool to see them all lit up, and it's always really exciting when you find one in the overworld for the first time. Speaking of the overworld though, we are going to be leaving it shortly and we move on to one of the places I've been spending a lot of my time recently, the End. But first of all, we have to stop by my redesigned Stronghold portal room, which I've designed to look as close as a facsimile to the End as we will get here in the overworld. So this is the End, but not the end of the series, not the end of the video, just the End dimension. This right here is my End hub, which I decided to build after fighting the dragon 20 times and generating all 20 of the End portal gateways around the outside, which you can see are now linked by this platform and have had the bedrock removed from them so I can just walk into them anytime I want to. And I do like to walk into them quite frequently because one of my favourite stops out here in the End dimension is, of course, the Enderman farm, which was designed by Gnembon and is an absolute blinder of a farm. It's really quite special seeing this thing in action, as you'll be able to see in a couple of seconds when I drop down and start killing some of these Endermen. The thing is built at the very bottom of the world and it spawns Endermen so fast. It's now one of my favourite XP farms to use, not only because you get a load of Ender Pearls and a load of experience, but just because of how crazy this thing looks when it's in action. I normally don't get to see it from this angle either, so this is really, really entertaining to watch for me. I definitely need to expand the Ender Pearl storage though, because after using this thing to mend my tools a bunch of times, I have more Ender Pearls than I know what to do with. It's a good problem to have, but it's still a problem. It's not the only entertainment I have out here in the End though, because after trying out a few different villages, I thought, why not build a village in the End? Why not give that a try? Because it is still possible to bring villagers out into the End dimension, and using a flying machine, I transported a few out here and started my own village from scratch. Most of them are librarians, there are a couple of farmers, and the idea behind the landscape of this place is that it was sort of half built by the Enderman. They'd seen the overworld and they'd stolen a bunch of blocks from it, but they weren't quite sure what the landscape was supposed to look like, which is why all of the stone formations here are built in spirals and that kind of thing. In exchange, the villagers have been trying to build houses looking like the End City towers, and they've done a pretty good job of that, building them out of oak and dark oak there. And this is the place that I stole a bunch of shulkers from recently to bring them back to the central island and then to the overworld for the How Did We Get Here advancement. There are a couple more stops to make on the tour, a few miscellaneous places we haven't visited yet, one of which is this blaze farm, which has always used slime block flying machines to transport the blazes around, but more recently I decided to have a bit more fun with this farm as I wasn't using it all that much, and instead of just dropping them into a kill chamber, this thing now sends them into the overworld through nether portals, transporting them to a swamp where I can then damage them using a water flow. And the reason you don't see more of that in this video is because it got a little bit broken, or rather, I forgot to swap the portals around and relight the portal in the area where they're all supposed to turn up, so it ended up letting a lot of blazes just freely out into the swamp, and well, the less said about that, the better. Down here, though, we have a farm that I'm actually pretty proud of. This is my double cave spider spawner and skeleton spawner farm, which is still probably one of my main sources of bone meal. If I want a whole bunch of bone meal in a hurry, I typically come to this place instead of AFKing at any of my general mob farms. Got a couple of spawners on each side of the farm and a skeleton spawner in a slightly more remote location that still all gets triggered when I stand on this spot, delivering both spiders and skeletons straight to me whenever I want them. And spawner farms are still one of my favorite things to rig up in Minecraft. There's something really satisfying about exploiting something like this for your own benefit, and so every time I want bone meal, I just come back here and I hit a few skeletons with a looting sword, and typically that gets me by. Bone meal and bone blocks are both pretty nice to have though, so in the near future I might end up looking for something a little bit more industrial sized, or probably just building a better mob spawner to suit my needs for this kind of stuff. For now though, hitting skeletons into lava is always satisfying. And the last stop on our tour is something even more satisfying, and it's the Snow Plains biome, where we built the giant version of the Minecraft Survival Guide logo, so it would go into some map art. And this was one of my favorite projects that I've done recently. It took absolutely ages. It was such an incredible level of detail we had to put into the project, but I was so happy with it. It's one of my proudest achievements, and it kind of fits that one of my proudest achievements is also the name of this series, because I'm so proud of this series, and I hope you guys have enjoyed watching the first 200 episodes of the Minecraft Survival Guide. Here's to the next 200. I hope you guys enjoyed this tour. My name has been Pixlriffs. I'll see you guys soon. Take care. Bye for now.